Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this webinar about the games and animation industry in the DIKU Business Club's Computer Science Impact for Industry series. My name is Pall, and I'm Head of Business and Innovation at the Department of Computer Science at the University of Copenhagen. The webinar is organized by DIKU Business Club in collaboration with Vision Denmark and supported by EU and Denmark's Erhvervsfremmebestyrelse. The same partners, as just mentioned, we will organize an event about VR and AR November 12th, actually with one of the speakers from today, Matias. He's also be joining us there. The webinar is the third in a DIKU series about computer science and the impact in different industries. We started with the health tech sector, then the public sector, and today's a sector I find very, very interesting, the games and animation industry. Vision Denmark is the national cluster organization to support and develop this industry. And Jesper Krogh Kristiansen will tell more about this later. Yes. And we at University of Copenhagen has joined Vision Denmark as members together with Copenhagen Business School, Technical University of Denmark and IT University, because we want to develop more university collaboration together with the industry. And I hope this webinar today can give us some inspiration and some ideas and for new opportunities and projects. Well, Matias will present one really interesting case today, and Thomas will tell about how the industry and how the universities has collaborated for many years about education. So it's a very interesting program today. So today's program, and I'll just change the slide. Here we go. Welcome by me. First, Jesper Krogh Kristiansen from Vision Denmark will tell more about the commercial opportunities and potentials in the games industry based on some of the research and some of the reports they made in Vision Denmark. I'm looking forward to that. Matias Søndergaard from Rokoko.com will tell about the collaboration between Rokoko and DIKU about faster, better, and more intuitive animation tools. I'm also looking very much forward to that. Then we have a short break just to get some coffee or stretch our legs. And then Thomas from DIKU will tell more about DIKU and how DIKU connects the competencies for the games industry. And it's a quite unique collaboration between more than 15 universities and art schools. And he trains more than 100 candidates a year for the gaming industry. Really interesting, I think, initiative, and that initiative that all other industries could learn from, I think. And we will end the discussion with a discussion what the industry and research community can do to develop the industry. You can comment in the Q&A or in the comment box fields. And we will save the larger questions till the end. If you have some clarifying questions to the speakers, we can take them as they go. And we will record the webinar and we might use parts of it afterwards on the web, and we will send an edited version of the slides to the participants afterwards. So with this introduction, I will give the word to Jesper, and Jesper, maybe a short, longer introduction of yourself in Vision Denmark than I just gave.
Hello, I'm Jesper. I'm going to talk to you for the next 20 minutes, so I hope you're ready. It's going to be fast because we have like 30 slides to go through. So it's going to be really fast, but hopefully really interesting as well. I'm going to be talking about commercial opportunities and potential in the games industry. And I'm representing, as Anna said, Vision Denmark. But let's get started. Let me see here. So my talk today is going to be like, who am I and where do I come from? We're going to talk about the global games market, the local games industry, and tendencies and opportunities that arises from these and are like general trends in the industry. So let's start out with who am I and where do I come from? Okay, so this is like my magic card. My name is Jesper and I work for Vision Denmark as a games consultant. Like my career to getting here in like 5 easy steps, like to give you an idea of my background. I have a master's degree in design and media science from the University of Copenhagen. And from there I went out and I was employed as what was called like an engagement manager at Microsoft Denmark for 5 years, which basically meant, you know, trying to keep people on like MSN and Messenger for as long as possible. Then from there on, I went on to become like a freelance game designer, audio designer. Then I became employed at Interactive Denmark, first part-time and then full-time. And then eventually Interactive Denmark became part of Vision Denmark that I'm representing today. And in addition to all of this, I'm also the author, sole author of one book and co-author of another book about the Danish games industry, which is these two books. And in general, I've been writing about games for like pretty much the last 20 years. With like a specific interest in the Danish games industry, both for like books like this, but also for like game sites like the Danish version of IGN and Eurogamer, and also did some stuff for the Metro newspaper when that was around. So about who I'm representing, Vision Denmark. Like this is like the blurb that's on the homepage about Vision Denmark. It's a nationwide innovation business alliance that aims to boost the visual storytelling and entertainment industry by bringing together Danish producers and suppliers of creative technology, research, and knowledge institutions and other parts of the business community. I mean, that's a very long and very like detailed description, but to give like the essence of the mission of Vision Denmark is the belief that that by adding together like games and TV and film and animation and what we define as XR, which is like VR and AR and stuff like that, that the sum becomes greater than the parts. That if these sectors can work together, there's a huge advantage and a huge potential to be released, because the technologies and the tools that we're using in these industries are becoming more and more similar. So that's like the basic idea of Vision Denmark. So that's about, you know, who I am and who I represent. So let's move on and talk about a bit about like the global games industry to get an idea about, you know, what does it actually look like at this moment, you know, in 2020. So this is from like the Newzoo, which is like probably one of the most used like business analyst agencies about, you know, the games industry. And this is like how the industry looks like now and like how it's projected to look up until 2022. So as anybody can see, it's pretty huge. It's actually on track to cross like $200 billion in 2023, which is of course like a almost incomprehensible number. And what is more interesting also that it shows a pretty steady growth of about 10% a year or 9% in this case, but it seems pretty steady. I mean, this has been going on for probably in the last almost 20 years. That's been growing like 10% every year. If you go into some details about this, about the share, that you can see that about half of the revenue generated in the industry comes from like smartphones and tablets, which means iOS and Android. So despite the perception about, for example, like consoles being like defining for the games industry, it makes up like less than a third of the industry. Of course, it takes up like a large mind share and publicity, but the revenue generated is like half of that comes from mobile. And if we look at geography, this is where revenue comes from geographically. We can see that Asia actually makes up almost half of the revenue generated in the industry alone. So like Europe and North America together makes up, you can say that that's kind of like, that's one half, and then you have Asia, which is like the other half, and then you have like some smaller markets in between. So that might be surprising to some, and I mean that's one of the messages that we try to go out with when we talk to game developers, is just to tell them, you know, be observant of, you know, there's a huge market outside of just push, oh, we're just going to make it in English and that'll be fine. Everybody can understand English. That's not necessarily the case. Actually, as well, when you say, oh, you can just publish it in Europe in English or stuff like that, there's actually a lot of markets in Europe where they will prefer a localized version, like Spanish, Italian, German, stuff like that. So I mean, that's usually kind of one of the things we say, like, be observant of what the market actually looks like and where revenue comes from. And then this next slide just shows that the value of each individual player is still larger in the West generally. This is like a chart showing the number of players, where you can see that here, like the North America and Europe is an even smaller minority, but this also leads to the conclusion that they spend more money per person. So they are worth more, you could say. So with that kind of like talking about, this is what the global games industry looks like, let's take a look at the Danish games industry and what constitutes that. So I found some key figures. These are from 2018 because it takes a very long time from the Dansk Statistik, the Danish Statistical Service, to pick up data. So these are the latest numbers we have, where we can say there's 159 game development companies in Denmark, active companies in Denmark, which employ the equivalent of 955 full-time employees. And these will usually be distributed. They will usually be more numbers. It's just what it converts to almost 1,000 like full-time employees, because you have a lot of freelancers and part-time workers and stuff like that. So I mean, if you're counting specific persons, that number is probably going to be higher. The collective turnover of the industry is just above 1 billion Danish kroner, and the export part is about 650 million, which is fairly good for industries in like the creative sector. The average employees per company is, of course, 6. You can just divide up the numbers. And another small division item 8 is like the export share of the turnover, 61%, which, as I said, is pretty high especially if we compare to like the other sectors in the Vision Denmark cluster. If you look at TV and film, like they don't have nearly as high a degree of exports. So, and this is like the development of the revenue in the industry over the last pretty much 10 years. This was the only graph I can find. This is actually a year older, so I actually updated it with just games, so you can see where games is now. It's here, and this shows that over the last 10 years, the games industry in Denmark has grown by about 184%. Which converts to a growth of 11% a year. So it's actually pretty much in line with like the global trend. So we're kind of performing a bit better than that, but not by too much. Yeah. So if we look at like characteristics of the business. Some more numbers is that about 60% of the companies are located in Copenhagen, so it's very centralized industry. And if you're counting employees or people employed, that number will probably be even higher, or that share will be higher, because the companies that are located in Copenhagen are the ones that have a lot of people working for them. It's like Movistar Planet, Cybo, IO Interactive are probably the 3 ones that they employ about 100 people each. So that alone like accounts for a lot of people. The majority of the revenue in the industry is made by a small minority of businesses. I mean, it's a hit-driven business, and I mean that's generally defining for games. But that also means that the revenue generated is very unevenly distributed. a lot of companies are very small. This is not surprising. Looking at the previous slides, was with an average of like 6 employees per company, and we have 3 companies that have about 100 people. So that means a lot of the remaining ones are very small, and a lot of them are actually like one-man companies. Like the greatest need that we have identified for the industry is that they need financing. Of course, like all industries would say, oh, we need money. But actually what the games industry needs the most is actually like investments. It's not necessarily just funding support, it's more investments. And that has always been a challenge, but it's become worse because there was like a partly state-funded games investor called Capnova that some of you may have heard about, that was actually defunded by the state 2 years ago, and that has kind of left a gap in the industry at home, where in the span between 1 and 4 million Danish kroner, if you need investments in that span, it's really hard to find because there are no obvious other sources in Denmark, and it's still too small to get those investments from abroad generally. So that's like probably the biggest challenge right now for the industry. But also, there's a huge potential when things go right. We can look at stuff like recent successes would be stuff like Ghost Ship Games, who made like Deep Rock Galactic, which even while still in early access, it had sold more than 1 million copies. You could look at stuff like Triband, who made What the Golf, that like not only won a lot of awards, but also sold really well, and they're expanding heavily right now, just moving to a new office, hiring people and growing, and also had really large commercial success with What the Golf. Then I have a couple of, So also to kind of illustrate the potential of the Danish games industry, we usually pull out the slide to show that we compare ourselves to Finland and Sweden a lot, because we say we are very much alike Finland and Sweden in that we have a population that's tech savvy, high level of education, social security, great access to good internet lines, stuff like that. And looking at this chart, we would probably say that all the empty space above the Danish bar, like that's the potential that we should at least strive to climb somewhat up and be comparable to Finland and Sweden. At least that's the argument we make. Then I have a couple of slides that are probably that I wanted to include. It's from some research we did at Vision Denmark that I thought would be interesting, because this is hosted by DIKU. It shows something about the composition of educations in the industry. That an interesting development here is that the development from 2010 to 2018 is like, you can see that a lot more people now have long educations, which we think is because the Danish educational system is adopting to and are now more focused on actually training and educating people to go into the games industry. So you can see the growth in that, and a couple of other numbers from that research is that there's a huge need for programmers, which of course, DIKU, we hope that DIKU will supply for the industry. And also another interesting fact that kind of underlines the international outlook and international element in the industry is the graph on the right shows the number of employees in the industry that are not like registered citizens in Denmark. So that's like foreign employees. That shows that actually more than a quarter of the people working in the Danish games industry are not Danish. So then I want to talk about, I've grouped it into two, like internal opportunities, which are like opportunities within the games industry itself, and then external opportunities, which is like opportunities that lies outside of the games industry itself. So if you look at the internal opportunities, well, there's subscription services. You probably know these: Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation Plus, Apple Arcade. that these are only growing in importance and size, and this means that instead of earlier where it was like a democratization where you would just push your game out to Steam or the App Store or whatever and kind of fight for yourself, now we're moving back towards a model where you need to get access to the gatekeepers for these services. So instead of just pushing your game out and pushing it straight to the consumer, now you have to find and talk to the gatekeepers for these services and convince these. So you have to please the gatekeepers for these services as well as the players who will play the game in the end. So and we predict that this will only become like more important in the years to come. Then content for other games, which is something that is often overlooked. Obvious examples would be Minecraft and Roblox and Riot, who have established this Riot Forge, where other people can make games based on their IPs. I found a number that said that the Roblox developers expect this year that other developers who are making content within Roblox, they will earn more than $250 million this year. So there's actually a very viable business making content for other games. So it's just to say that this is worth checking out. This can be a very viable way to make a living as a game developer, and it is perhaps a bit overlooked, so it's not as crowded as other places. Then of course you have like game streaming, which is not really established yet, but so it's more of a long bet. But what seems interesting is that so far game streaming is like mimicking the way you play games on your PC or console normally. But what there might be an opportunity for is actually making games that make use of the different distribution that happens on streaming, because you have everything running from a central server, which gives you opportunities for example, running like huge multiplayer games with advanced physics or massive amounts of players or stuff like that. That wouldn't be possible due to bandwidth issues in the normal setup. So, and there doesn't seem to be any like games that have utilized that yet. Then hyper-casual games are still evolving. I mean, it's a bit more mature, but it's still evolving. And what we see is that what's happening right now is that people who used to play like very small casual Flash games, they will be moving over to phone now because Flash is being discontinued. So there's hyper-casual is still evolving and still growing. So that's an interesting space right now. And it's not mature enough yet that you won't be able to get into it. You can still get into it before it solidifies, like, for example, a lot of mobile games is today. And evolving markets will drive growth, where growth will happen in like the next 2 to 5 years. There will still be some growth in Asia, but stuff like Middle East, North Africa, India will probably become much more important in the coming years. So it's a good idea to focus on that. And also one of the challenges about this is that you can't just necessarily put your stuff out on the App Store and expect it to be bought in those places. For example, if China, you will have to like make a local deal with someone representing you in China. But also in, for example, a lot of African countries, you still need like a local publisher of some sort, because a lot of the distribution happens through like telco-owned portals and stuff like that. And more genres will probably come to mobile. You know, 3 years ago, people would say, "Oh, you can't do a shooter on mobile." But now Fortnite and PUBG on mobile are like huge titles, and we would expect other genres to follow along. It could be like simulation games, it could be like grand strategy, but we would expect that these will come eventually to mobile. So maybe there's a good business in going in and becoming one of the first titles to actually represent these genres on the mobile platform and kind of crack the the problem of how do you convert this genre that's normally on a console or PC to make it pleasant to play on a mobile phone. And I would just say, like, the jury's still out on stuff like VR-based games, AR-based games, and blockchain-based games that are like, the interesting stuff might happen, but it's not super clear if it's going to be happening in games, because what we're seeing with VR and AR right now is that a lot of the development on these technologies is happening outside of games, is happening like in health, education, stuff like that. But on the other hand, you also have some examples of successes like Beat Saber that kind of also says that, well, there might actually be a market for VR games as well. And blockchain is still like, yeah, we need something to prove that this is interesting to put into games. We need a success of some kind. Okay. External opportunities. And this is some of the stuff that Vision Denmark is very interested in, because this is some of the stuff that takes games and combines it with other things. Well, let's take a look at those. Well, obviously, game tech is moving into other visual production, and there's actually a spelling error in the headline and saying that. I can tell. I'm sorry about that. And that just means that you have like Unreal Engine and Unity being used in producing film and TV instead of like and not just using it for special effects, but also using it for like more like mundane production issues. The most popular example is probably like the Mandalorian, which uses Unreal Engine for a lot of its like visual effects. You can see, for example, this shot. It's actually they're standing in front of like an LED screen that is like supposed to look like some kind of landscape, because the tech has now reached a point where you can actually do this and it will not look fake. Then you have like games as part of larger story worlds, and that's because we see a tendency for games not to exist like as isolated product, but to an increasing degree being a part of like a greater thing, like some collective story world that's also represented in film, TV, books, all kinds of like different representations. Like classic examples would be some of the stuff that the Lego do. I mean, they probably like, that was probably actually what saved them. The common story is that Bionicle saved Lego, and that was probably actually one of the first examples of them thinking of like a story world, saying of like, we are going to make something that is like a physical toy, but it's also a game and it's also a TV series at the same time. Another good example would be like Pokemon, which is also like one like collective IP, but represented on a lot of different platforms. And of course, like this is where our collaboration with DIKU comes into the picture. We believe that there's also a business opportunity and a better collaboration between institutions, because as of now, like the industry and the educational institutions have been kind of like walled off from each other and like been making their own things. And what we need to do is be better at talking to each other, so that challenges and opportunities in the games industry can inform the research that's happening at the institutions, but also so that the games industry will be aware of the stuff happening at the institutions and looking at that and seeing, is there some commercial upside to this that we can use in some way? And of course, we're talking to DIKU here now, and this webinar is like a first example of some of the stuff we can do. But we're also talking to, for example, the IT University about what can we do? Can we do some kind of events, you know, to help the two sides inform each other. And then finally, it's like this more broadly, you know, the use of game design methods in other industries. In like in education and health, in training, and like in app design in general. I just have some quick examples, like Labster is making like a VR version of a like chemistry laboratory for educational purposes, which is of course much easier, and with the corona and all that stuff, great timing, because now we can do like chemical experiments from home. Health, like there's a lot of examples. I found a Danish one that's called Stigemester, I think, like Injection Champion or whatever, where it's a project that is using like AR to teach children how to inject themselves with insulin if they have diabetes. Training, here's an example from Bolwerk, who've made like VR training tools for cabin personnel in airplanes, because it's very difficult and expensive to ground an airplane for training. So this is a great way to experience and train like dangerous situations without using expensive flight hardware, without setting anyone in danger. And like an example of using game design in general app design would be stuff like Endomondo, where it's like, oh, let's take put in achievements for like this fitness app. So this is like using game design methods, putting in achievements, so you will be more encouraged to become fit and use this app, because you use like game design logic to make it an enticing application. I think that was it. I hope you bear with me. It was really fast. I had a lot of ground to cover, but I wanted to let you know that you're always welcome to contact me if you have any questions. We are doing like events on a regular basis on like more specific and narrow themes about these about driving a successful games business. And you can find us on the web, on Twitter, and on Facebook. And yeah, and I don't know if there's a question or two, I'll be happy to answer. I don't know if we have time for it, or maybe we should save that for the panel. That's probably up to you, Anders.
Well, there was a question. Well, we'll save the larger questions for later, and please write them in the chat. There was a question in the chat about 1/7 of the people on Earth are gamers. Are 1/7 of the people on the Earth gamers?
I would I would say probably more, because maybe you can calculate that 1/7 is digital gamers. But the thing about games is also that games, they are inherent to human nature. So even if we're not playing digital games, we create games in our head. When you're trying not to step on the lines on the sidewalk, that's a game you make for yourself. When you run with your friend to see who can reach like the bus stop first, that's also a game. I mean, games are inherent to human nature. But if 1/7 of the Earth is playing digital games, I would probably actually say more, but I mean, it's definitely 1/7.
Yes, thank you very much, and Jesper, we'll continue the discussion later. I will give the words to Matias.
I actually didn't prepare so much about myself. I can do it super short. I forgot to say, of course, thank you, Anders, and thank you, Inge, for coordinating this event in this crazy times in the world. I'm happy to join and then share our experience about our actual collaboration with DIKU. My name is Matias, and I'm the co-founder of Rokoko, now heading our product development and our tech development, and also having this, I guess, fantastic position where we also collaborate directly with DIKU. I do not have a fancy magic card, but maybe I should at some point. Thank you for that inspirational thing. I actually have a background from economics and philosophy, but always been very inspired by how you can create new economic systems around decentralized systems. And that was actually also what kept me motivated by co-founding Rokoko in the first place. And I have some background slides about Rokoko. And if you have any concrete questions, please let me know afterwards. But I'll try to stick to Rokoko and then the actual case of what we do with DIKU. So my title for this presentation is Faster, Better, and More Intuitive Animation Tools, which is kind of an overlap of both our interest in Rokoko and also the interest of the PhD, which I'll get back to. But first, some context. Let me know if I'm speaking too fast. I'll try to do it loud and clear so everybody can follow. But this is the team, and we are now, actually we just crossed 30 people. We are a private-owned company with investors, and most of the people are in Copenhagen, close to all the fantastic game studios we have in Copenhagen. And around, I would say 50% or more are engineers building stuff. So that's motion capture tools, both consisting of a hardware component and a software component. And then we have a couple of guys in the US, in San Francisco and in LA. And then we just actually made a small remote office in Athens with some game developers there. Yeah, long story short. So we are around 30 people in total, and this is a team picture. And I think just because I saw Thomas was a part of this panel, I would like to go kind of back in memory lane, because I co-founded Rokoko together with 2 people from the film school. Long story, very, very short, their ambition was actually to take the best from games where you can interact. It's interactive by nature, and you feel empowered as a gamer, which is fantastic. But also merge that with theater, where you kind of experience something which is true and real. It's happening right here, it's right now. You have a sense of authenticity. You can, of course, also have that in games, but it's really present and it's really emotional. And also combining it with the last component, which is kind of animated movies, where you can kind of create these fantastic fairy tales and kind of the stories with princesses and frogs and a lot of other stuff. And I don't know whether or not there's sound, but this is just a small look into this project. Can you hear something now? Is the sound on? Okay, that's fine. Then I'll just speak. This is the recording from the film school, where you can actually see that we were utilizing an optical and motion capture system from OptiTrack, hacking a face tracking solution for actually getting the actor's facial mimic on top of the digital characters. So a crowd of kids could interact with the actors, which live performed the show in real time as a new entertainment medium. And I can just let you see some of the last parts here. Perfect. Now I can actually hear something as well. So what you see here is also, of course, I guess you understand the premise. The audience here cannot see the actors. The actors are controlling like digital puppeteering or the animated characters on the scene with the means of motion capture. So that was actually the driver for doing a lot of the stuff we do today. So that's the reason why I brought this. So it's not only for the sake of Thomas, but also for the sake of understanding what we're trying to achieve. Yes, and this is just the happy, not ending, but we'll just see the last part here, where you can actually see how you can give a kind of action and you can bring things to life in new, novel ways. And again, I also have a few slides, but basically just to encapsulate what we were trying to do both back then and also now. We're really intrigued by what you can do with new kind of sensor inputs, new kind of capture technologies with kind of this OptiTrack system, but also new IMU sensors, like the ones you have in your phones and smart devices today. But also we saw, which is also still kind of in development, all of these now new interfaces to consume experiences. So not only do we have the flat screen in front of you in the movies or on a TV, but we also starting to have glasses and VR devices. So it's actually opening up for a whole new world to create content and consume content and distribute content, which is very interesting. And that can then be driven by new mobile CPU and GPU. So again, the mobile have really led to a lot of, I guess, communication things, but also for gaming and entertainment purposes, which is very interesting. And then last but not least, what we're also very keen on getting to know as good as we can is the game engines, which is basically a broad 3D platform for creating applications, particularly games, but you can do a lot of other stuff with them as well. So this is kind of the tools which we're trying to master in Rokoko, the company I come from. And we are particularly trying to develop new sensor inputs for creating content. So the very short vision can see we're trying to power digital humans. And we are trying to do that by actually facilitating and making a lot of creative tools that everybody can access, regardless of budget and technical expertise, to make character animation and motion capture very easy. So it's kind of a democratization project like Unity. We're very much inspired by them, but also saw the pain points we experienced back at the film school with the big OptiTrack volume, where you kind of have to have the film school budget, you have to have some public investment, you need a dedicated studios where you kind of have these cameras, which all have to see a couple of markers, and then you can do triangulations, you cannot have occlusions, you cannot have direct sunlight. It's very, very hard to set up, it's hard to operate, it's hard to maintain, and it's very expensive. So we really want to lower the threshold and the bar to starting to work with motion capture. I'll come back to why, but it's really a strong and powerful creative medium. So that was kind of the driver back then, and it still is. And today we're mainly focusing on not creating the games or the characters, but actually the tools for creating the character animation. Yes, and the case which I'm going to talk about today is then having a lot of similarities to that vision. Is also how can we then apply machine learning research to also lower the threshold for doing character animation in the creative industries. So we saw the motion capture is a fantastic tool, but it's super expensive. And we really want to make it super easy to use, affordable. So let's say Thomas's students on DIKU, they could actually use this for creating a lot of animation data for their content. I'll get back to the actual content of the PhD student, but just so you have an idea about the background and the challenge we are facing, both in the collaboration with DIKU, but also in Rokoko with our tools. No, sorry, I had the slide first. It's also our motivation for actually doing the collaboration with DIKU can be summed up in I think 3 focus areas, which we could elaborate later on in the discussion if you are eager to do so. The first one is we really want to learn from the newest research out there, and this is a fantastic option to do so. We also, secondly, want to share some risk. When you are a company, you also have limited resources. And you really are forced also by investors and the board to take as little risk as possible. So in that regard, it's fantastic that we have these public funding and collaboration opportunities in Denmark where we can actually co-fund, for instance, an industrial PhD, which we did here, together with DIKU, the Innovation Fund, and us. So it's really to share some risk about something which, of course, fingers crossed, everything will work out to be a fantastic final product, which we can actually commercialize. But there is, of course, a chance that it will not happen in the quality or in the time we have available. And then the last one, the third, is actually to see some of the fantastic research being done globally, also on some of the conferences affairs where you actually have the chance to try to apply some of that. At least what we see from the industry side is there's a lot of fantastic research being done, but the research kind of realm or domain have a kind of a economy of itself. You want to be credited in fancy journals, you want to do a lot of other stuff, but there's kind of a lot of research, corpus of research, which are never actually applied and being kind of formed in a way where people can actually start to use it in an affordable manner. And so we saw a lot of potential there to also do so within utilizing a lot of data, which we had available. So some content about the problem we're facing, which is basically the same in the PhD and in our daily life. Very, very briefly, how you do character animation normally. Either you do keyframe animation, so basically like old school where you move limbs around and then you interpolate between 2 keys and then you get animation. It's a fantastic art and people are mastering it, especially in Viborg in the animation school there. They're very good at this, but it takes a lot of time and it's very expensive to buy the right software. And it's really, it's a long, cumbersome process. Maybe if you have a high-end budget, you can do 5 seconds of animation per day or something like that. Whereas with motion capture, that is the second option. Normally the golden standard have been optical motion capture like we used on the film school. You can do a lot of animation very fast. It's kind of one-to-one. I can move around and you basically just capture all your realistic movements in real time. So you can really produce a lot, but it's very costful to establish, to set up and to maintain. And there's also a lot of cleanup and there's a lot of kind of side costs which come with that solution. So that is basically how people are doing advanced character animation today. And this is what we try to change by making easier and more accessible animation tools. So we do this by having a couple of products. This is not kind of a sales pitch, so I'll do it super brief. We have a suit where you do body tracking, so you can animate your body movements. Then also yesterday we just actually start to share information about the gloves. The purpose is basically the same, but it's a pair of gloves where we have these IMU sensors in each sensor in each finger, and one on the other arm. I can take the arm and then I basically start to capture my finger movements in real time, so I can apply the finger animation and the hand animation to my 3D character in space. We of course also hope that there will be tons of other applications for this, for instance in VR, AI, where you want to live interact with the world around you. The second kind of product we have is Rokoko Studio. That's our software where you visualize and record all the movement, you forward it to a third-party application. Now it's fairly simple, but we really want to leverage that so people can kind of cloud collaborate with all the animation data in real time. And the third one is our motion library, which is basically a marketplace where publishers producing very high-end motion capture assets can then share and distribute and sell the animation assets. And it's especially valuable for, again, schools and small indie game studios who do not afford either a motion capture system or to hire actors. So let's say that you want to do some stunt moves, you want to do a backflip or something else, then you can search for backflip in this motion library directly in your game engine, such as Unity. And then you can find it, pre-visualize it on your character, and then you can buy it if you want for $3. So that's really costful, and a lot of people are using this for getting animation for secondary characters or for doing previous. So in the pre-production phases, you can really block out something a lot fast. So it's basically like you have a, I don't know, a photo stock library. It's all centered around the same idea as we had before, make it easier and more accessible to create character animation. Especially the motion library is very relevant for the PhD. So the value of motion capture in general is, and of course this is our take, that we think you can do things way faster, way cheaper, and you can actually also make more engaging content by having a proper animated character in your stories. You can tell more emotional, more appealing stories, and you can basically have a more depth and more complex narrative in all your entertainment, which is very interesting. And the way that people have been doing this so far, this is just a small clip, which we normally show. This is the high end, this is the Sony studio, which is doing God of War. So this is also one of the publishers on our motion library. And he's a fantastic stuntman, and he's performing these animations, which you see in the Kreesa's character in God of War, which is a fantastic piece of work, but also really, really high end. So what we're trying to do here is saying, okay, you can go into the motion library and you can actually buy Eric's animation assets for $3. So if you want some of his cool sword fighting animations, whatever, then you can actually go in and buy them, and you can get access to this, and then you can learn based on these experiences. And normally they have a huge, like you saw in this small animation or in this small video, they have a huge volume with very expensive gear. So we're trying to do that intuitive to people. And normally when you have a TV setup, you also have something like this. Of course, this is a bit a caricature, but you have a lot of gear and it's very static, one place. So we're basically trying, and this is of course, again, a marketing picture, but I hope you get the point, to try to make a mobile and an accessible piece of hardware embedded in a full textile suit, so you can actually go on site, you can go outside, where you can actually perform animations where you want for an affordable price. And this is a picture of our smart suit, which is the main product we have developed and we sell today. Good. And this is again, this is just to give you an idea about the range of creators using our tool today. So there's a lot of commercials and TV ads where they utilize this. This is again an example where you can actually use it on site for a TV commercial. And this is a one-man army creating kind of this whole Mars experience. And again, a more artistic style, 2D style, where you can also use motion capture. This is for previous purposes. You can also see more cases on our website if you're curious. This is for music videos, for artistic stuff, for playing around with storyboards in 3D. Normally, when you work in kind of a storyboard pre-production phase, you don't do 3D stuff because it's too expensive in terms of timing and money. But with these kind of tools, you can actually start to do it very fast. And this is also for gameplay, some other stuff. But this is just to, we have a variety of customers around the globe. I think we have customers in 75 countries. And this is just to show you how a big volume looks and how these animation assets, which we are redistributing on the motion library, they're being produced. So here you see a big volume with, I think it's Vicon motion capture cameras, where one camera is more expensive than our entire suit. And then you can see that one person searched for an animation asset within Unity, applied to their custom characters to see whether or not it's actually appealing to their use case. I think that's happening now. And then you can actually see, wow, that looks good. I can preview it in a 3D scene, and then I can actually acquire it and download it directly to my work. And then I can visualize it like here. So it's really trying to do things faster and easier. Yes, and that brings me to the collaboration with DIKU. We have known Kenny, one of the researchers at DIKU, for some time, and had a lot of research collaboration with him, and he's great. And we had an existing very great engineer. We found a common interest, and we thought, okay, we have thousands of animations in our motion library. What can we actually do with all of these data to help to achieve the same goal, but from a novel perspective? So with machine learning, we thought that we can basically solve some of the same issues, but from a different angle. So we applied for an industrial PhD, and we got it, which was fantastic. Actually, we only applied once, which is fantastic. And the goals in the PhD is threefold. So the first one is saying, okay, there's now a lot of cleanup processes, both with IMU-based motion capture system like we're doing, but also with optical systems. If we know exactly how the end result should look, like we know from the motion library data, then we should be able to train a neural network, and then we can actually do some automated cleanup processes, which can save people a lot of time. So that is kind of a low-hanging fruit. So that's one part of the project. I'll go into detail later. Then we also want to see if you basically have a person walking in the library and you have a person waving in the library. And I want an animation where you have a person waving and walking at the same time. Can I actually then take two parts of two different animation clips and bring them together? Data synthesis, which is basically, I guess, can also be a solution where you apply machine learning. That's the second topic of the PhD. And the third one is actually saying, okay, now I have a walk cycle, somebody walking generically, and now I have a drunk person. Can I extract the drunk style from one person and apply that to the walk cycle? So now I actually have a drunk walk cycle. And if I have a drunk walk cycle, can I then remove the style? So it's becoming a generic walk cycle, meaning that we can actually try to deduce and apply style to generic animation clips. So that's the three topics of the PhD. We of course hope that we can complete all of them. Maybe that's a bit naive, but let me dive into the issues. So the first issue, just to give you some context about the hardware, very brief again. Our systems are based on what you call inertial measurement units, which is the same type of sensors which you have in your phone. So we're trying to take off-the-shelf hardware component, bring it into a new context, and then redo a lot of the firmware and software. But they suffer from some issues, but the most crucial one is drift over time, because there's no absolute precision. So these sensors have a tendency to drift over time. And we're trying to see if that cleanup problem can actually be solved by this machine learning process. So that's just the background for some of the cleanup. So we're using a gyro, magnetometer, and an accelerometer, and do a lot of sensor fusion to kind of take the best from the three types of sensors, but sometimes that is not enough. So the first topic here, I just want to move this so I can see you clear, is actually the cleanup and also to synthesize data. So we have magnetic interference, which is a big issue for us. Sometimes we cannot really trust the magnetometer, but if we know exactly what could be a real truth, and then we can compare that with the input we get from the suit, then we can actually solve it. That's from the angle of our motion capture data from our suit. The angle from an optical system, like you saw from the film school, is that you have what you call occlusion, which is an issue when a camera tries to see an object, but there's another object coming in between that line of sight. So that is occlusion, and that will create a glimpse. And how you normally solve it is basically just adding more cameras to your studio. So you have less likelihood of occlusion. But for instance, if I have my, I don't know, my hands in this pose, then the cameras will not be able to see my fingers. So you have occlusion if you have markers there. So you're trying basically to solve it by having more expensive cameras, more markers, more space, and it's basically just an endless loop. So we're also trying to see if we can also do cleanup based on marker occlusion issues. And then the data sensitization would basically be some of the ways that you can look at it. You're having some interpolations where you see this is to be trusted, this looks clean and good, this looks like an error, this is also clean and good. Then we sensitize between the parts we like and the parts we don't like, we skip them, as I understand it. Of course, I'm not the one carrying out the PhD. Maybe that's good. The mixing motion part is, again, as I described very early on, you have two animation clips in a database where you have one guy here, his arms have an animation part. It's going backwards and forwards. And you have another animation clip where you basically do the walking. You want to achieve a combination of both. To basically say we have thousands of animation clips, but if we kind of have endless ways that we can synthesize and mix all of these motions together, basically like you do, I don't know, music or something else, then you will have a lot of options for utilizing this database for doing something which can be maybe good enough for some background characters in the background. Maybe it will not be Gollum, or it would not be a phantom hero character because the style can end up being a bit generic, but it could be good enough to have a crowd of 10,000 people running around doing a battle or war instead of basically just copy pasting the same animation tons of time. So that's the second focus. And the third one,
Matias, the time is running, unfortunately.
okay,
very
sorry.
fast.
I will have two slides left. Thank you for reminding me. That's the start extraction. To say that was where I have the drunk example. Can we actually distinguish between a generic and a styled motion? And if yes, can we then know what is a style and what is a generic thing, and then apply the two to one another? As you see here, this is two ways of having a very clear style in your animation. Good. I think I have one slide. I tried to time it, Anders. Sorry for that. This is basically just an industry overview. We of course also hope, the same as Jesper just explained with this in Denmark, that now we are mainly applying our technologies to the entertainment industry, but we see a lot of the same tech can be applied in sports training, enterprise training simulation, in healthcare, VR, AI for actual inputs, digital social interaction, Facebook, it's called Facebook Reality Labs, just had their keynote yesterday, where you see a lot of things happening there as well. So we basically hope that a lot of this tech can actually be utilized across a lot of industries. Thank you.